Go ahead and put a hashtag live if you're with me live. Put a hashtag replay if you're here with me on the replay so that I know that you've seen the video. Hey, Megan. I've been doing cakes for, let's see, technically it's been about 16 years. It's a really long time. When I started in the cake industry, I started at just a grocery store. Like I didn't even really make cakes at home because I was in college. So that was like my part-time job, was a cake designer at a grocery store. And then I just kept getting consistent jobs every place we lived in different bakeries, all the way from like the tiniest little rural bakery to a $1 million bakery in St. Louis where I was pumping out, let's see, easily like 20 cakes a day or something like that. And we're talking like high-end cakes. But then the grocery store was like 30 cakes a day. So it kind of depended on what the cakes were supposed to look like. But I've been doing this a long time, and I would love to show you guys some tips right away that I'm going to do something to this cake that might make you gasp. I'm going to intentionally break it and then show you how to fix it if that ever comes up. The first thing I want to do is talk to you about leveling cake layers. So I'm not going to go in depth on how to bake the cake, how to bake them level, all of that. That would be a completely different subject. So today we're just going to look at the cake I have, and I'm going to show you how to level a cake that may or may not be flat already, okay? So this is just a layer of chocolate cake that I baked. I'm going to put this board up on my turntable just so that I can deal with this better. Now, the first thing I want to mention is whenever I trim a cake, whenever I level a cake, I put it on a piece of plastic because this is just the plastic it was wrapped in. This was in the freezer. So I unfroze it, and then I leave it in the plastic while it's unfreezing. And then I unwrapped it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it so that the bake side up, because this part of it, if you have a good pan, like something like what I use is Magic Line, if you need links, there's that Master Bakery Supply list that I have. It's got all the links to the pans that I use. You're going to get a nice edge. So whenever you go to trim a cake, you always trim with the flat part on the bottom and then if it is rounded on the top. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to show you how to trim a cake, okay? Maybe I should have got a vanilla cake. It's kind of hard to see it. I hope you guys can see this. Chocolate on my black apron. Okay, so I normally start with a serrated knife. My arm is up and I'm at a 9 o'clock position. I'm holding, my cake is centered on the turntable. Center your cakes, guys. Like I'm watching all these videos on Instagram with these people icing cakes and their cakes aren't centered on the turntable. It's just like blowing my mind. Just like throwing you know, a bowl or a cup in pottery on a pottery wheel. Your stuff has to be in the middle for you to not do a lot of work, okay? And just for it to work in general, right? So I've got my knife on the side here at 9 o'clock. Serrated is facing away from me. I'm going to move up and down in a sawing motion as I take my left hand and I turn the turntable. And what I'm doing now is I'm cutting the little, it's like a little muffin top, that little ridge that goes around the side sometimes if your cake rises up above your pan. I usually use a 2-inch pan, and I've got my leavening correct to where it will rise over the top if, you know, if everything goes well. So I went around the side. Now I'm going to take my serrated knife, and I'm going to hold it flat. And I'm going to get right in front of my cake, and I'm going to look at it and see what's the lowest point. When I find the lowest point, I'm going to very gently saw back and forth as I come across the top of the cake to level the top. Okay? Just like that. And I'm going to leave these chunks on the plastic because I'm going to wrap all this up and get rid of it when I'm done leveling. So some of you might be thinking, okay, you know, I want to use a tool to do this. I don't want to use just a knife. That's up to you if you guys want to have that kind of stuff on hand. I found them to be cake wasters, and I found them to, it's just easier for me to do it by hand. Some people don't like to, so you're going to have to decide just what kind of decorator, you know, what's the style you want to have if you want to trust yourself to do it with a serrated, or do you want to get some kind of tool to cut for you? I think an adbay is what it's called. Okay, so I went ahead and leveled the top. You're going to get down right in front of the cake and look at the front and just make sure everything is level, okay? That is literally all it is to leveling the cake. I'm going to brush the crumbs off, and then I'm going to take my plastic, and you can see I'm just wrapping it up, and then I'm going to move it, okay? I'm going to go ahead and put it on this board here just because I want to show you how to tort a cake. Now, if you're wondering what is torting, okay, so hey, Annie. Torting is when you slice a cake in half or however many levels to put a filling or something on the inside. Do you have to torte cakes? No. Do I torte cakes? Not normally. It kind of depends on what the flavor of the cake is and what the flavor profile I'm using is. I have formulated my recipes, my fillings, and my icings to work together without having to torte. So if you haven't done that and you feel like torting is going to make it easier for people to taste your flavors, then you might want to do this. So again, you can use an Agbe or some kind of tool to do this. I just do it by hand. I use my turntable to the highest efficiency that I can. So I take my knife and I hold it next to the cake. It's centered on the turntable. I hold it here, and I'm not going to move the knife. If you can watch, my hand is steady. I'm moving the turntable. And what I'm doing is I'm just turning the turntable because it's a perfect circle, okay? And I'm going to cut through the cake. I'm going to score the side by just turning the turntable so that I know where the center is on the cake. And then I can just gently come through and cut 2 layers. Okay, so there's a 2-layer cut. Can you guys see that? So this is called torting. Now, what I would do is I would just treat this as 2 different layers of cake. I've worked for a bakery that baked all their cake in single levels. So they didn't want to torte, but they would bake a cake that was about 1 to 2 inches tall, and then they would stack and have cakes that end up being like, I think it was like 6 or 7 inches when they're done. So it depends on how you want to do it. But if you need to cut a cake, you can do it that way. Now with this second piece, before we actually stack it, I want to intentionally kind of destroy it and then show you what you can do to fix it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this over real quick. I'm going to do our normal trimming. I'm at 9 o'clock over the top of the cake. So knife over the top, 9 o'clock down, up and down sawing movement to get that muffin top off. Okay, and then I'm going to come across it. I'm going to find the lowest level. I'm going to come across the top real gently. You can do this. You can take your time with this. So if it's worrying you to do this by hand, just take a few layers off at a time. You don't have to do, the whole thing and break anything. Cut down too far, things like that. So I actually came down a little bit too far. I'm really sorry that this, I'm hoping you guys can see this chocolate cake on there. I came down just a hair too far on this side. Now, if you do that, so if you have an unlevel layer, you can either turn it the other direction, start at the lowest level again, and then cut back to the highest level, just real gently, trying to keep in mind that you want your knife to be flat when you're cutting. If your knife is like this, you're going to cut down. If your knife is like that, you're going to cut up. So you just want to keep this as flat as possible. Hey, Sandy. Glad to see you. I'm just looking at the comments on my phone because I can't scroll right now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you what you can do here. I'm going to do something kind of strange, you might say. I am going to intentionally break this cake, and then I'm going to intentionally take a chunk out of it. And then I'll show you something you can try if that happens. Because when we break cakes, when cakes fall out of pans incorrectly or whatever, it can be a real problem, and then sometimes we just get frustrated and we don't know what to do. So this isn't all the ways you can save a cake, but this is just kind of some simple things you can try. So if I just would intentionally break this cake, I'm not going to physically do it because I don't want to get crumbs everywhere. But let's say I just cut it, okay? So this cake is now in 2 pieces. So what do? It's broken. So one thing you can try is you can get yourself some icing, some buttercream. Some people use ganache, to do your crumb coating and stuff. I usually use buttercream. So you would get your buttercream, and then you would literally pretend like this is kind of like a puzzle that you're gluing back together. So if my cake was broken in the middle, I can make something that kind of looks like that. I could get my offset spatula, and I could just flatten it and use it like glue. So then I'm just going to take this cake, and I'm going to push it back together as best I can, and then there you go, right? I just glued it. Now, if you have any kind of cake with damage, like broken or missing pieces, you're going to want that to probably be on the bottom if you're stacking cakes. If you're stacking cakes that are really heavy, it would be kind of I'm not sure. We'd have to look at your cake to know for sure how to do it. But usually I place them on the bottom. Now, let's say that this cake had a chunk out of it, like it got caught in a pan, okay, like that. So I'm going to remove this piece here. Now there's a piece missing down there. Can you guys see that? It's just a big old chunk missing out. So if that had happened out of the pan, I would put the missing chunk probably along the bottom, just like this, where it is, because then what I'll do is I'll take icing and I'll try to fill it as best as I can. So that's how I would deal with those two issues. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about filling. So we have our cake board down. We have non-skid under the board because we don't want our cake going anywhere on the cake turntable. I've got the board centered, and I've got this first layer centered, the one that's broken and has damage. It goes down first. Now to fill a cake, I've got icing in a buttercream in a bag. I have a 1A round tip. You can do this tipless. You can do this with a large flat piping tip. It really just depends. I like this 1A. This is what I teach people with. I'm going to take my hand. I'm going to pull the icing all the way down to the bag, to where it's full. And in this L part of my hand, I'm going to twist the bag a couple times and pinch it in the L part of my hand to hold. Then when you're squeezing with your Popeye muscle and squeezing this icing out, it's not going to go backwards in your bag. Some people tie the bag. Some people use clips, whatever you need to do. Okay, so when we go to fill a cake, we need to first create an icing dam. Not everybody does this. This is what's going to help you with the ooze. If you have any kind of oozy icing, you want if you're filling. If your filling is really loose, you're probably going to get some oozing. If you're using a filling that has a lot of liquid in it, like fresh fruit, you're probably going to get some oozing. So fresh fruit, you want to lay on, napkins and things to soak up some of the moisture. So the very first thing you would do is, if you've got a really kind of oozy, liquidy filling and you don't want it to seep down into your cake, you need to put down a layer of icing to sort of seal the cake, okay? So to do that, I'm just going to put a dollop on top. I'm using my offset spatula, the bottom part of my offset spatula. I put my finger on the golden dot here, and with pressure coming down from this finger, I'm going to just turn the turntable. I'm using the turntable to its highest ability here. I'm trying not to move a lot, I guess we'll say. So I'm just going to press down, and I'm using kind of a left to right ocean motion feeling. What you don't want to do is this. If you guys could see the top of the cake, what I'm doing is I'm ripping the icing up and the cake is coming up with it. Because when you touch icing with icing on a spatula and pull up, the icing sticks to itself and then it pulls off the cake. So what you want to avoid is doing that. That's where people get a lot of crumbs and stuff on the side. If you guys are here and that's happened to you before, let me know in the comments. I see this a ton in my classes where people are, they're just removing their spatula from the cake in a direct pull, and it's pulling the cake apart. So you want to avoid that. If you come off the cake, you want to come off at a 45-degree angle where you scrape, and then you're kind of coming off on the edge rather than the flat part, and then you don't pull the cake up. Okay, so that's to seal the cake if you're going to have a filling in there. Now we're going to go ahead and create our dam. So that is where you start somewhere like 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, straight up and down. And it's centered on the turntable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the icing bag on the edge of my cake, and then I'm just going to squeeze with regular pressure and turn the turntable, and then it's created a perfect circle. I haven't moved this arm at all. I just used my hand to turn the turntable. I'm going to do 2 more of those right on top of each other like a coiled pot. Okay. So this is an icing dam. You guys see that? All right. Now, I don't have any regular filling today because I didn't want to waste it. I didn't want to make a big mess. I'm just going to use regular buttercream. For a 6-inch cake, usually about a tablespoon of filling is sufficient for each layer. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it right in the center here, about a scoop. And then I'm going to take my offset spatula, and I'm going to use kind of the further end here with that left to right ocean motion and my left hand turning the turntable to press that filling down all on the inside, all the way over to the edge of the, all the way over to the edge of the dam, okay? So what I'm trying to do is just create a flat layer of filling that goes all the way over to the side of the dam. Once you've done that, then you can take your spatula, you can start on the left-hand side, you can pull this dam in. Do you guys see how I'm starting on the outside pulling in? And I'm turning with my hand, with the turntable with my left hand. So turning, touching to the side, pulling in, touching to the side, pulling in, and it just becomes a rhythm. And once you've done that, you've pulled that dam over right on top of the filling, and you've basically kind of closed everything in. So that's the basics of filling a cake. Okay. Now, I know I torted this other layer, but I'm not going to take the time to fill it because it would be done the exact same way. You guys probably don't need to see that again. So I'm going to take my cake, baked side up, because that's the good edge if you have a good pan. And I guess I should put some icing in there though, because it's going to slide on me, I think. I'm just going to put a little bit of icing in here to stick it, since I torted it earlier for you. Okay. This cake is so moist. It's falling apart a little bit on me. Okay, so when you put that second layer on, you're going to want to, again, get your face right in front of it. You want to push that cake until it is centered on the bottom cake. All the layers are centered. Turn quarter turns with your eyes down in front to look at the side and make sure everything is centered. Then take your hands and just very gently press on the center of the cake down to push out any air bubbles, and you're checking for it to be level, okay? If it's not level, it's possible that it's likely that one of your layers is not leveled correctly. At the very end, I'm going to show you how to deconstruct this if you needed to take some of the filling out, okay? All right, so it's up here, ready to go. I'm going to show you quickly how to crumb coat, and then I'll show you how to take it apart in case there's any kind of issue with your filling, which happens a lot in my classes. It's probably like too much filling, or they mess with the cake a little bit too much. Sometimes it's the heat. Sometimes you're just not sure. It starts seeping out, you know. Okay, got my icing here, twisting my bag. I'm going to hold this horizontally. Now here's that spot that has a hole in it. I'm going to go ahead and squirt a bunch of icing in there, just to basically kind of like restructure it. Okay, it's not going to be as strong as cake, but it's something to start, to see if we can, make this cake work. I'm going to have a line all the way along the bottom. Again, I'm holding my bag at 3 o'clock. I'm squeezing. I'm turning the turntable. I'm not moving my arm, this arm. Okay. I'm going to do another one right on the seam. Squeeze that all the way in. There's a seam here from torting, so I'm going to squeeze that in. And then I'm going to do one right on the top edge, because you want to make sure, hey Joy, you want to make sure that you are protecting that top edge. This is where a lot of cakes can get ripped off if you're not very experienced with decorating cakes. So you just put that on there to basically try not to touch it very much once the icing's on there, and it makes it so you don't have to touch it and rip it off. Okay. Now, for crumb coating and icing in general, you're going to take I always teach with the offset spatula. You're going to take your offset spatula, you're going to come over the top of the cake, and then you're going to come down at 9 o'clock. This is the only place that you go. You don't do any of this, or that, or this, ever. It's always 9 o'clock, using your left hand or your non-dominant hand to turn the turntable for where you need to smooth the cake, do the cake. I'm going to turn this way up just so you can see a little bit better. So I'm at 9 o'clock, up and over the cake. I'm going to move left to right with that ocean motion feeling. Do you guys see how I'm not lifting my spatula at all? This is really slow motion for you. I'm taking my left hand, I'm turning the turntable left to right. As it comes closer to me, when I'm ready to kind of push down more icing, when it comes around like this, I just go the opposite direction, and I take that extra icing and go the other way, okay? So your main goal is to not pull off the cake with a spatula like this. Do you guys see that? How it's immediately ripping the cake off? So left to right, coming off at an angle, kind of like you're swooping off, turning the spatula so you're coming off when it's like this rather than like that. If you need to stop going around. Okay. So I've got pretty good coverage all the way around. Now, instead of touching this top edge, I'm actually just going to smush the icing down. I put a little dollop in the middle too. And then I'm going to pull in just like, it's kind of like I'm doing my filling. So I'm just going to push that icing all the way around the top, and then I'm going to pull in from the edge with the spatula, outside in, okay? It's going to look something like this. Now to finish off our crumb coat, we're not going to go all the way through this cake today because after a crumb coat, you need to cool it. And of course that means it has to be in the fridge for a few hours. So we're going to take you all the way to the crumb coat today. I am going to smooth this crumb coat out with a credit card. This is technically a days in hotel card. Doesn't have to be anything special. I find credit cards to be the easiest to use. This is a trick that a pastry chef showed me when I worked in that large bakery in St. Louis. I have never used anything else. I learned how to use this, and this is all I need to have on hand. So I know right now it's really popular, like the acrylic discs and the big long scrapers. You can definitely use those. This is just what I use, so I'll show you kind of what it looks like. I'm going to take the card to help me clean off my spatula, because you always want to have clean tools. And you want to have a clean board. So the first thing I do is I clean off my tool and I clean off my board by scraping just right along the board like a little shovel. Scraping all those crumbs up. And then you need to get rid of those somewhere, either on a board or in a tray or in a bowl. You want to have a crumb bowl somewhere on your table to get rid of stuff. Okay. Now I'm going to hold this card at basically a 45-degree angle. It's going to look kind of like this. Can you guys see? An angle kind of like that. And I'm going to turn the turntable with the cake in the middle. I'm not moving my arm. My arm, you can see my hand is staying steady. I'm not doing a thing with it. I'm just putting medium pressure against the cake. As I turn, the card is at 45 degrees because I want smoothing. If you want to take icing off, you turn to 90 degrees like this. You guys see how I just chunked that off there? But if I go back to 45, I lay it on again. Of course, you're not going backwards. It's either going to be a 90 degree to remove or a 45 to push down. And then you're just going to turn, turn, turn. You're going to move all the way up the side here. And I'm not stopping. You can see I'm turning and I'm moving my card up. See how I'm above the top now? And then I can move back down to smooth the side. Another trick is that if you have a bunch of icing on your card like this, if you come across a spot that has a hole in it, I don't really have any, but let's pretend like there was one here. On your normal turning, all you have to do is push in your angle even further to lay that big chunk down. So this is one of the tricks to people who ice really quickly, is that they know the angle at which they need to push and how they need to lay the icing down. All right. So the last thing I'm going to do here after I smooth the side is I'm going to take my card, I'm going to lay it on the side like this. I am not pushing because I don't want to round the top of my cake, which is something else I see a lot of beginners do. Now when you come up to the top here, do you see how I have like basically a crown of spiky icing on top? Because the edge goes all the way above the actual edge of the cake. This is what you want. You want a reduction sculpturing, art term, of the top edge here. Okay, so you don't want to have to fight to grow it on. You know what, I'll just show you how to re-put it on if you get around the top. But you want to start with a crown of spiky icing so that you can lay your card down and pull it in. You guys see it just became completely flat right here. Because I didn't have to fight with the edge to make it sharp. Lay the card down, pull in, and you just pull in. That's all that's going to happen if you have enough icing up there. So I had a good amount already. I didn't need to do anything else. Now, if for some reason you lose a lot of icing on top and you have a rounded edge, go ahead and take your bag. You're going to basically add more material so you can reduction sculpture again. I'm going to take it and I'm going to squirt it right along the top, just like a big circle. I'm adding it back in, okay? You got to be really gentle when you go to scrape it. Some people just push a little bit too hard, so try not to push too hard at first. I'm going to come around the edge to flatten the side. So I basically kind of drew my own crown, okay? Flatten the side, and then I'm just going to pull in like we just talked about. And as you go through, you're going to be able to flatten that out. And you just want to get in front of it again and make sure that things are pretty flat. You guys see that? Nice and flat. Okay? So this is your crumb coat. When you're done with that, This puppy is going to get wrapped in plastic, and you are going to put it in the fridge to cool. If you need to leave, if you only need it in there about an hour or two to set, you don't really need to wrap it if there's nothing else in there that's going to contaminate it. If you want to do this like a day or two before the item is due, you can wrap it up in plastic with like two layers all the way around the board and everything to keep all the air out, and keep it in your fridge for a few days. Megan says, could you use the credit card to make a rounded edge on the top? Yeah, like if you're doing a like a shaped cake, sure. So that's the other benefit to the credit card, is that it's small. You can even turn it and use just this side. So if I'm ever doing a shaped cake or a number cake or anything that's really hard to deal with, 100% I'm using a credit card. Like I said, I don't really use the big ones. I learned how to use this, and I just never really needed that. But I can see how having the big one would help people who have less experience, because there's no way they can really mess it up, right? Like you just turn the cake, and if you have the acrylic or something on top, you can't go any further in. So I can see how it's beneficial. I just don't teach that way because I don't know. I like people to know how to use this just in case they need to backtrack a little bit and have maybe less tools or smaller tools. I'm all about a small tool set. You can tell I have like 4 things that I've used so far, right? Okay, so let me show you real quick what you can do. Let's imagine that we did this, and there is like literally strawberry jam coming out the side of my cake. I don't want that. It's going to get in my icing. It's going to be a problem. Or let's say it's not level. So you know that you have to deconstruct your cake to get to the layers to either level them or take some of the filling out. Basically do your filling layer again. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. It's not pretty. It's not clean, but I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so I'm going to take my 2 spatulas. I'm going to find the center. Where's the center of my cake? Or where is the filling coming out of? Let's say it's coming out right there. Okay, we'll just pretend. I'm going to take this, and again, I'm going to leave my hand steady. I'm going to turn the turntable to score where I need to go in. That's where I need to go, right? So I'm going to take my spatula, and I'm going to real gently come in here, and I'm going to press in about halfway, because I'm going to have to lift this, okay? So I want to basically cut into the icing, not the cake, to separate it. And then I'm going to take a second spatula back here. Do you see that? You can use bigger spatulas too if you have them. And I'm literally just going to lift it off. Like I said, it's not going to be pretty. Hopefully you don't get a lot of ripping. Okay. So there it is. You guys see that? Ah! So I'm just going to put this down on another board. Let's pretend like this is, I lost a little bit of cake. Okay. Not a huge deal. I'm going to take this area and I'm just going to clean it up, because there's probably something wrong in here if there's filling dripping around. Okay. So let's say here I've got this fixed. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do this kind of quick because we already know how to do this. I'm going to put my filling in. Everything's the same. Okay, cool. Got my filling in. Now I got to put it back on, right? So you're going to make sure everything's level. If the top is the part that's not level, you're going to have to flip it over on a board, trim the bottom before you put it back on, okay? So I'm going to take those 2 spatulas. I'm going to lift this up, and I'm going to put it right back down. And then you see I set it down, and then I pulled these out, okay? You want to check the front, make sure that it's centered on both edges. If it's not, take your spatula, push on the side that's coming out too far, and just with that ocean motion left to right, push it until it becomes flat again, okay? You got to do left to right on this because at this point your cake's probably kind of warm, and if you're pulling on it like that, trying to push it, it's going to rip the cake up. So then you're just going to take your spatula and you're going to come around like normal. You want to make sure your crumb coat is not super thick. If you had to come in with more icing, you're probably going to end up with more crumb coat on your cake. If your crumb coat is too thick, when you go to do your final coat, you could pull it up because there's just too much of it. So you want to come through, smooth that side. You will get your credit card. Make sure your board's cleaned up again because you don't want to ever put boards with crumbs or any dirty things. You don't want to, first of all, you don't want to deal with a final coat with that anyway. but you just want it out of your way. You want to work as clean as possible. I'm going to use my credit card to pull around, flatten the sides up. You can use your bag to put more icing in if things got kind of weird when you moved the cake. And then you're just going to pull into the center again. So this can be done, guys. It can be done. And there's your crumb coat. All right. So before I hop off here, I know this was fast. I haven't seen really any questions. Ooh, I got icing all over my phone. Yeah. I'm cringing just thinking about deconstructing a cake. Okay, so Wilton sells, and maybe other companies now sell, it's called like a cake mover, and it's a really big flat metal handled thing, and you can push it in like this, and if you have two, they'll touch each other flat, and then you can pick it up and move it. I used to use that. I now only have one of those, but I used to use that in the another shop I worked in a lot to deconstruct. You can do that too. It's kind of a mental thing. So deconstructing a cake, you just have to believe, okay, I can do this. It's just cake. I can figure it out. You got to know those signs of like how not to touch the cake to rip it up with your spatula, those kinds of things. Working with a cool cake is always easier. So if you know you have to deconstruct your cake and you have time, go ahead and put it in the fridge for a couple hours and then come back to it and deconstruct when it's cool. That could help. One other thing I want to mention is if we can backtrack on this cake has been leveled, torted, broken, and had a hole in the side of it, and deconstructed, and it is still ready to go for a final coat of icing. So it can be done. I'm just letting you guys know. Just keep practicing, keep going. If you have any questions with decoration or design like this, put them up in the group. We can chat about it. So I'm actually going to, in the elite group this month, some of you are in there already, some of you aren't. I'm going to take this same cake and I'm going to teach them how to final coat it and how to put fondant on top. So that's going to be something that's in the elite group. If you guys decide to join us, you'll be able to see that in there. I might even take them through this again in a more detailed manner. And then also in the elite group this month, I'm going to be talking about turntables. So this is one type of turntable I have. Actually, I have two of them. We're going to talk about special ways to use them, the differences between the brands, and just things to look for in a turntable. So if that's interesting for you as well, we're going to be doing tool demos in the elite mentorship as well. I will see you next Thursday for another Thursday Fave training. If you guys have anything that you want to learn about, you can go ahead and ask in the group. I already have some stuff planned, but I would love to know what you guys are interested in too. So I'm so glad you're here with me today. I am not seeing any other questions, so I'm hoping you guys got all the information. And you can go ahead and comment on this video if you have any other questions about what happened here, and I'll get back with you later, okay? I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for coming.